Good morning. Our readings are taken from the book Rays of the One Light, Weekly Commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This week is week 33, and our topic is, Does Satan Exist? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. The Bible tells us in chapter 4 of the Gospel of St. Matthew, "Then after baptism was Jesus led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil." To most modern minds, this passage seems quaintly obsolete. Psychologists have said, in fact, that the temptation of Jesus, if it occurred at all, was purely psychological. They call it a projection of desires lurking in his own subconscious mind. The subconscious plays a strong part, certainly, even if not a unique one, in any testing the spiritual seeker must undergo. The Bhagavad Gita, in dealing with this undeniable reality, quotes Arjuna in the 3rd chapter, and then Sri Krishna's reply. "Yet tell me, teacher," says Arjuna, "by what force doth man go to his ill, unwilling, as if one pushed him in that path?" Krishna replied, "Desire it is, passion it is, born of the darknesses which pusheth him, mighty of appetite, sinful and strong is this man's enemy." Yet even Krishna describes passion as born of the darknesses. The fact is, as Paramahansa Yogananda wrote in Autobiography of a Yogi, all thoughts vibrate eternally in the cosmos. Thoughts are universally and not individually rooted. A truth cannot be created, but only perceived. Psychology, yes, but psychology attuned to currents of consciousness that pervade the entire universe, attracted by each of us according to our own personal inclinations. Yogananda, quoted in The Path, said, "I used to think Satan was only a human invention, but now I know and add my testimony to that of others who lived before me that Satan is a reality. He is universal, conscious force, whose sole aim is to keep all beings bound to the wheel of delusion." We should take pains, then, to attract uplifting currents of universal consciousness, and to avoid attracting the negative, which, disease that it is, can infect our thoughts, even while it leads us to believe that our thoughts are purely our own. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
Thanks for coming. Thanks for being here. My name is Lorna, if you don't know me. This is Manisha, and Bharati is joining us this morning. And it's always a privilege, a blessing, and great fun to be here on Sunday with you. Our numbers are a bit depleted this morning because we still have a lot of our friends down at Spiritual Renewal Week in Ananda Village in California. And I get little bits and pieces of messages from them saying it's been a really, really wonderful week for them all down there. They'll be back. So Satan does exist. He shut off my computer this morning when I was printing my notes for the sermon. It's all ready to go. Bharati, I was going to meet Bharati and bring her to church here, of course, the last few minutes before, and it just said, "I'm done." And it just went out, and then they were all gone. So I said, okay. We don't give in to Satan. This topic is always interesting. It comes around, we follow For those who don't know, we follow these readings every year in this book that Swami Kriyananda put together. So the order of the readings is the same. And Spiritual Renewal Week comes around every year in August when this reading comes up. And I usually get to do it because I don't get to go to Spiritual Renewal Week. So it comes around again and I say, oh yeah, how can I talk about Satan again? And every time it's something new. There's new levels. There's new ways of looking at it. Yogananda in this reading said that he will add his testimony to all who came before, that Satan is a conscious force. Swami Kriyananda, who is, his picture used to be over there and they switched it. So now I have to do this. Swami Kriyananda, over here, he's a direct disciple of Yogananda. And he wrote a book about his life with his guru and his coming on the path called The New Path. And he tells a story in there that's quite fascinating. As a very young devotee, he'd found his guru, he was new on the path, but he was still exploring a lot. And he'd heard stories of disembodied entities and wondered if that was true, if there really was anything to this. And he got really curious about it and decided to explore and see what would happen. And he tells about how he had a dream that, where he suddenly in this dream, he was in a room that was real dark. And he suddenly thought, oh, okay, now's the time. Here's a chance. I'm going to go meet this entity. Basically a demon, or somebody who, some kind of conscious force that was not uplifting. And so he said, I'm going to go meet him. And all of a sudden, he felt this, this disembodied spirit approach him and was there in the room and battling and trying. He said, I knew that he was trying to take over my consciousness. And then he said, suddenly the thought occurred to him, suddenly the thought occurred to Swami that I may not win this battle. And so as soon as he realized that, he immediately called on his guru and said, Master. And he said, it was gone, it disappeared immediately. And later, an interesting side note to that, he was talking to a fellow monk, disciple, who said at that same time that night, he was awakened in his room, somebody coming up, stomping down the hallway and pounding on his door, and in a very loud voice said, who's in there? And the monk's name was Jean, and he said, Jean? And this voice said, I don't want Jean, I want Donald Walters, who is the name of Swami's given name, Donald Walters. And then he stomped away again. And this was at the same time that Swami was having his dream. You'd think if a disembodied spirit was looking for you, he'd know where you were, he could find you. But, and then he asked Yogananda about it later, and Yogananda said, yeah, he just treated it pretty lightly and said, these things happen, don't be frightened by them. Fear decreases our magnetism. Fear weakens us. And so fear is not a good place to go. And I will add my testimony as well to these other great souls. And I also have that story, but I also wanted to read you. Kamala Silva, she was a direct disciple of Yogananda. She wrote this book called The Flawless Mirror. If you haven't read it, I really encourage you to. It's incredibly sweet. She came to Yogananda as a very young woman, a teenager, when he first came to the United States in the 20s. So she was with him in the very early years of his time here in America. And she and her mother spent a great deal of time with him, and he would stay at their house, and this was, before he established the centers that are now there, and before he had really established his work. And the stories are really, really wonderful. But one of the interesting things that she shares in here is a experience she had with dark forces. She said, I had an interesting happening in conscious sleep. And she explains in here, as Swami does as well, that we have, when we usually go to sleep, we go into a subconscious state. where our mind just kind of keeps playing around with our past, with experiences we have, with thoughts and patterns that are old. And that's why oftentimes our dreams are quite jumbled and strange, because it's just like digging through the basement or something. The subconscious mind just does things while our body is resting. But there's also conscious dreams. There's dreams that are of a higher nature that can give us experiences or help us to understand things. We can find solutions to problems. We can have experiences that are uplifting. And then there's also really superconscious dreams where we are actually go into a much more astral state of light and experience, and the qualities of those dreams are different. Anyway, she says, had an interesting happening in conscious sleep. I traveled down a long sunny road with high trees on both sides. Suddenly, all of my being was tossed into dark space, terrifically tossed, as one would shake corn in a popper. I felt I'd been entirely lifted by some force and thrown, and I could do nothing about it. I was not frightened and said, "It doesn't matter what happens, God, for thou art with me here, the same as anywhere." And then I was gently, oh so gently, out of the darkness and again in the bed. From the gentle way I was returned, I believe it was some kind of test. That's very impressive, to be able to not be frightened, and says, "It doesn't matter what happens, God, for thou art with me here, the same as anywhere." I also once had a dream, it was interesting, where I was doing an arati. We light candles and we offer our prayers and offer the little light that is in us into the greater light. And I was doing an arati, and suddenly there was this entity, this being, this demon, that was quite distorted and powerful. I felt a lot of power came between me and the altar. It was just suddenly there in front of me, sort of in my face, real close. And I knew that the intention was just trying to keep me from doing what it was I was trying to do. And as soon as I realized in my dream what it was and what was happening, I just said, "Master," calling on my guru, and it was gone. It was just completely gone. There are forces that exist that most of us usually don't have to deal with. We hear stories and we get little touches of it and we have little experiences. But it's real important to understand that they're there and they're real. That's why Swami put this reading into our lessons every week, because it's a very important part of the path. As soon as we turn towards the light, as soon as we start making that decision and saying, that's the way I want to go towards that light, then there's a conscious force that wants to stop us. And it's important to realize, it's important not to be afraid, but it's important to remember, and that it is conscious. I've had discussions with people who try to convince me that this darkness is simply a lack of light. It's not, it's like a void or a nothingness, or just a kind of like a blank spot on the canvas. But that's not my experience, and that's not what Master says. It's a conscious force. And the reason it's a conscious force is because everything is conscious. The yogic teachings describe God, or describe what is, the divine creation, the source of all that is, as ever conscious, ever existing, ever new joy or bliss. But the first part is ever conscious. It is consciousness. And this force that is trying to pull us away is part of that. And it's conscious. There's the way I think about it, and I am not a master. I do not see this through the eyes of a master. But in my mind, I sort of have visual images. And I just see it as this big wave. This creation went out. There was this huge energy that started vibrating, that that began this whole show, and it pushed out into, from the stillness of center, the stillness of spirit, it pushed out creation and started vibrating. And that force is still going. It's infinite, and it keeps going. And so it's like a wave, or like an undercurrent, that if we get caught in it, it just keeps pulling us away from that source. But it's of the same thing. It comes from the same place. Often when we get into discussions about the devil and God, it starts becoming more of an idea like there are two gods. Like the duality means that there's two forces. Like in superhero movies, there's the bad guy and there's the good guy. But it really is all one thing. It's just that vibration and that energy is continuing to go out. And we're trying to turn around and go back to the light. It's a moment by moment choice. It doesn't happen just once. We don't just say, oh, I want light, I want God, I want to be a devotee, I want to be a disciple, I want to go in that direction. It's not like putting your car on cruise control and saying, I just want to go that way, and then we go that way. What happens is we have to continually make course corrections. We have to continually come back and say, no, that's the way I want to go. That's the way, and we get caught off. There are, and oftentimes they describe these streams of consciousness, like currents in the ocean. I love the scene in Finding Nemo, the children's movie about the fish, where they catch the Gulf Stream. They're swimming under the water, and they're telling them that we just need to sort of get on board and catch this stream, this current that they all get in. And there's a turtle, I think there is, and I have this wonderful image of all these fish and all these undersea animals. They catch this current, and they get into the current, and they swim with the current. And then at some point, I think Nemo needs to get off, and he has to put a lot of energy to get out, of that current. But that's really very real, what's happening in the currents of energy and consciousness around us. We get caught in, and we want to be in those currents of energy and be in that flow that's going to take us towards light and not towards darkness. It's important that we continue to make those decisions every day, and we get opportunities every single minute, don't we? Which way am I going to go? Which way am I going to turn? How am I going to think about this? What is the consciousness I want to tune into? There are just so many opportunities to choose that light, because we live in a heterogeneous environment. We don't live in a place, in a world where it's all the same. Being in a spiritual community, I live at the spiritual community here, it is wonderful, because you're surrounded by other souls who are at least thinking the same way you do in some ways, and you support each other, and you help sort of create that flow of energy that helps support you in that. Let's go to the light. Let's go to that together. And that's really nice. But it's only a part of the answer. It's only one piece of the puzzle, because you still have to go out into the world, you still have to have jobs, you still have to raise your family, you still have the media to contend with, you still have other people to talk to, you still have all of these streams of consciousness and different vibrations all the time that you're coming up against. So you need to continue to make conscious decisions. I have a friend of mine, some of you know her, Karuna and Ram Prashad. They used to be part of this Sangha here, and now they're living back east. She puts out a publication every month called The Positive Press, and I get it in the mail from her, and it's a big sheet of folded paper, and she hand writes it all. She has beautiful handwriting. She doesn't crank this out on the computer. She writes it all by hand, and she makes copies, and she has her subscribers. If you guys want to subscribe, let me know. It's wonderful. She always has a positive story about something wonderful and beautiful that's happening in her life. She always has a recipe to share that's fun. She always has sometimes little artwork and things that people have given her. She usually recommends a movie and a book that is uplifting and fun. And oftentimes she'll have quotes from the saints or things that she shares. And the whole point is, I want to tune into this positive energy and I want to share it with others. This is what I want to do. My son sees that. My son Timothy is good friends with her, and we get it in the mail, and he says, how does she do that? How does she just keep doing that? Her life is not easy. She's not like floating through life with no challenges and is just having a fun old time. Her life is hard. She's got stuff to deal with, just like we all do, but she consciously chooses to be positive and choose that light all the time. In Sunday school here, I used to teach Sunday school for many years. We would have, one of our lessons that we did is we would create goodness glasses. We would make pretty fancy glasses and we'd put them on and we'd say, these are goodness glasses, we're going to see goodness. We're going to focus on and look through the lens of goodness to see goodness in the world. Because there's goodness. There's a whole lot of evil. There's a whole lot of nasty, ugly, icky, awful stuff. But this world is dual. And it's important to remember that for all of that darkness and ugliness, there is light and there is goodness. And the more we tune into that, the more we see it. Swami Kriyananda once told Anandamoyi Ma, who is a great saint in India, he thanked her, I think one time, he just thanked her for her goodness and for the opportunity to be with her. And she says, it takes goodness to see goodness. We have to have that resonating within ourselves. And the good news is, we're all good. We all have it within us. No matter how far we go down that road, no matter how many mistakes we make, no matter how many lifetimes we tune into darkness and evil and a whole lot of wrong thinking, our vibration, our actual identity, our source, what we really are, who we really are, is goodness. And so we can always tune back into that. We can always turn around the other way. And we can always find that and see that and nurture that and help it to grow within us, our awareness of it. We don't have to create it in ourselves. We don't have to worry about making it, getting it there. It's already there. What we need to do is just continue to nurture it and help it to be more and more in our consciousness, that that's who we really are. Master said, Yogananda actually said, it's important, it's a good thing, good practice to do every day, is to remember goodness within yourself. Not just to see it out in other people and to look for it in the world, but to actually remember the goodness within yourself. What did I do good today? What did I do to help somebody else? What little thing did I do or feel or experience today that is in me that is good? And the more we remember the goodness within ourselves, the more we draw that to us, the more our eyes open, our goodness glasses get more and more in focus, and we see it more and more. And the more we want to be in that, the more we want to have that experience of goodness. And then he says, eventually, what happens is we remember the source of goodness, which of course is God. And that's where we want to go. There was a, what was I going to say? There was a reading from the Bible. It wasn't in our reading today, but there's a passage in the Bible that is about the highest commandment that we can follow. And it's part of our Festival of Light that we'll do here in just a little bit. And I'm going to just read it out, and I'm not going to paraphrase it. I'm going to read it. Jesus was teaching, and one of the teachers of the law came and heard the debate, and he noticed that Jesus had given them a good answer, and so he decided to ask, of all the commandments, which is the most important? The most important one, answered Jesus, is this: Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There's no commandment greater than these. This is what all the masters tell us. Jesus put it so beautifully, but it's what all the avatars say. The first and the highest commandment, meaning the highest aspiration, the highest duty we have, the highest thing that we can do for ourselves and for the world, is to remember that God is one, and then to love God with all our heart, mind, soul, and strength. Anything that convinces us to do otherwise is Satan. Anything that moves us in another direction, that convinces us that we're not worthy of that, that somehow we're not part of that, we're not good enough for that in some way, anything that convinces us that that's not true, or that we have there's some other reality, there's some other script going on, anything that moves us in another direction than that is what we call Satan, because it's the opposite direction. It's that force that's taking us away, further and further away from that center of spirit. And we want to make choices all the time that, like I said, that course correct, that take us back to that center of spirit. And they're little things, you know? It's not huge, dramatic stuff usually. It's just little things that we can notice, that we can remember. I work at Home Depot, and they play music there all the time. And it's a struggle because I try to just keep it out of my consciousness. It's not horrible, it's just popular music that they play. It's just not something that I really want to tune into. I actually went through, recently, I've been there for several years now, and so it's getting harder not to let it in. And I just try to tune it out. And then I decided recently that maybe if I understood the words better, it would be easier to ignore. Part of my mind wouldn't be saying, what are they saying? So I started looking up some of the lyrics to some of the songs. Wrong move. Wrong move. Didn't help. Now I say, no, I really don't want to tune into this. But so, I try Om Guru, Om Guru, Om Guru as I walk, or I try to, sing songs that I know. But it's not, it's not a level that is really horrific. But there is someone on the night crew that works in the taking freight off the trucks and stuff. Somebody, I don't know who it is, at night, that puts on the radio in the receiving where all the trucks come in. They're not only, they're playing this music overhead, then this person, whoever it is, wants to play their music even louder. So they have a boombox in the receiving room that they turn on really, really loud to try to drown out the other music that's going on. And it is really satanic. It's a type of sort of acid rock stuff that just sounds like screaming. And every part of me, and I come in the morning, I have the opening shift, so the reason I hear it is because I come in at 5, and our shifts overlap, and so they're still working, and I just try to go around and about anywhere where I can't hear that, and then whenever I can, sometimes they'll just, of course, leave it on and go home. They're done with their job, and they've left, and they go home, and this is playing in there, and I just, I have to go in, and it's like this wall. I have to force myself to walk in and go up and get to the boombox and turn it off. So it turns off. But every time I do, it's like a victory. I just feel like, we just have to choose. What is it that we're going to tune into? What is it that we want in our life? And another way I've thought about it is I've seen, a lot of people are focused on food and their diet. And it's good to have a good, healthy diet. It's good to know what your body can handle. And we have ingredients listed on our food so that we can look. If you're allergic to soy, you can read the ingredients and see, okay, is it in there? I don't want to ingest that if my body's going to have a real bad reaction to this. So what we really want to do is look at the ingredients. Look at our activities. Look at our company, the company we keep. Look at the conversations that we have. What are the ingredients there? What is it in there? Is there something in there that's toxic for us, that's not going to help us? It's not going to move us in that direction. We can't be perfect all the time. We can't, we're fighting a battle on a day-to-day basis, on an hourly basis, and we're here in this world. We have a lot to learn. We have a lot of things. We have obligations. We have people we love. We have jobs we have to go to. We have things we have to do. We can't live like an avatar or live like a monk when we're in the world. But we can make some choices. And I would suggest just choosing a couple things. What is it that you can try to move out of your life and fill with light? What we need, like the song, what we need is light. We need to focus on that light. The other secret, of course, to that battle with Satan is to go deeply enough into spirit so that that experience is very, very real. And it's not pretend, that you understand that you are that eternal spirit and that you are of that light. And the only way we can do that is through meditation. We have to get deep enough inside to go and have an experience of stillness and peace and awareness within that it's real, and that's now part of us. And now we say, oh yes, that's who I really am. That's what's really going on. And then we go out into the world and we do what we have to do and we fight that battle. But we have the power of that understanding within us. And so it's not, we talk about meditation here a lot. We teach meditation. Meditation is one of the foundations of this spiritual path, as well as all religions, is that stillness in spirit within. But we don't do it to just be a good person and be a devotee and say, yeah, I'm doing that. I don't swear, I don't drink, or I don't, and I meditate, and it's just part of the checklist. What it is that it's the way that we have to get free. It's the way that we have of getting away from that darkness and into that light more and more and more completely. The yogic teachings say that you are actually not free from that satanic influence, from that delusion, until you reach a level called nirvikalpa samadhi, which means that you're in that awareness of spirit all the time. You can tap into that. People can go to this place of consciousness called samadhi, go to that awareness, have an experience of union with spirit and that awareness of God's presence. But then you come out of it, you go into it, and then you get drawn back into the world. So you can get to very high levels of consciousness and high levels of spiritual understanding. But if you're not there all the time, you still are able to get drawn into that delusion. It's like the oceans. Yogananda always described spirit as like an ocean. And the waves on top of the ocean, the storms, the waves that rise and fall, and the stuff that happens on top, that's where Satan is. That's where that delusion is. That's where the confusion is. But if you get deep into the ocean, then there's no more waves. It's just ocean of spirit all the time. And then there's no Satan. There's no battle anymore. There's no concern for getting pulled off course, because you're just in that spirit, and you've gotten beyond those surface waves and into a place of complete union with God. So that's what we want to do. And meditation is our way of practicing that. Meditation is our way of tapping into that. And yes, we'll forget. We do our meditation, and then we get caught in the world again. But that's why we continue to go back to meditation and doing the practices, so that we just try to dive deeper and deeper into that spirit and have more and more awareness, so that when we get into the world and we have these experiences of these currents that are trying to pull us in other directions, we have this strong center within us that will remind us, that will remember. Say, oh no, that's right. That's where I am. I'm part of that light. I'm part of that eternal peace. I'm part of that eternal joy. That's what's really real. I usually read from Whispers from Eternity, and to be honest, I just forgot to bring it up here and have it. So I want to read this one more time as to close. The most important commandment is, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. Om, peace, amen.